Welcome everybody to Artist Spotlight. How you doing out there? Today we have the feature and TV screenwriter and filmmaker Jazmen Darnell Brown. How you doing, sir?
Yo, what's good? Happy Sunday. Thanks for having me.
Oh, no problem, man. Thanks for being a part of Artist Spotlight. You mind if we jump into some questions really quick for you?
Yeah, let's do it.
Let's do it. Okay. All right. Number one, tell us where you're from and what got you pursuing a career in writing for film and TV.
So I grew up in Lansing, Michigan.
Okay.
I loved watching TV, but I didn't really know much about it. I wanted to get involved, but being from Michigan and there not being really any internet at that time, it's like, how do you even get started? Like, I had no idea. When I graduated, I wanted to leave Michigan as soon as possible. I went as far as I could. I went all the way to Florida. So I went to Florida State University, and I had a white friend who wanted to take a Spike Lee class. And he knew that he was going to be like the only white person in the class. And so he was like, because I need someone to talk to, right?
Yeah.
So I took the class with him. And before that, when I watched movies, when I watched TV, it was all just entertainment, right? It was like Rush Hour or Men in Black. It was like, okay, this stuff is fun. But really taking that Spike Lee class, I learned, what power film has. The fact that you can talk about social issues, the fact that you can be emotional, you can just get so much out in this medium. And so it was that class that really kind of helped inform me and let me know that this was something that I wanted to pursue full time. So after that, I decided I wanted to be in the entertainment industry. I wasn't quite sure how or in what form. I did a lot of writing, like I was part of my newspaper staff for 3 years, and I thought I was going to go into journalism. So I liked that path. So I graduated from Florida State. I was just writing features at that time on my own. I went back up to Michigan for a little bit, and it was at the same time they were trying to get stuff involved in Hollywood. And I hooked up with the Syrian filmmaker out of film school who hired me to write a short film of his. I wrote it not knowing what would become of it. 3 weeks later, he calls me up and tells me that he has $60,000 to make the short film.
Wow.
So I was like, what? Yeah. And so he made the short film, and it was like great production value. And we went to all these film festivals and got all these awards. And then he told me.
How did he finance it? How did he get to finance it? Just curious.
He was very well connected.
Okay.
Detroit has a very big Middle Eastern population. A lot of doctors and lawyers and stuff like that. And they kind of saw what he was trying to do, and they supported him.
Okay.
But after the success of that short film, he told me that this was a test that he really wanted to do a feature. And so he hired me to write the feature, which was The Citizen. It came out in 2012. It's a story of a Middle Eastern immigrant that comes to the U.S. before the 9/11 attacks. It's kind of based off his story. And even though it wasn't, black characters, it was still like a minority group. So it still kind of fit into the mode of what I wanted to do. But after that, I came out to L.A., thinking that this film was going to help me get things popping. And nothing, right? Because like everyone out here has a project, everyone out here has a film,
right?
But at the time, people told me that TV is really where the jobs are, and if you want to stay employed for most of these, that's where you need to go. So I tried to get into TV. It took me a couple years because you got to be really well connected out here. I finally got a job as an assistant on a Bounce TV show. The executives liked me, and so they brought me on to a new show they were doing called Saints and Sinners. I was the writer's assistant. So they had a lot of problems, and so I'm there, the assistant, seeing the problems that they're having, and so I just start pitching stuff. I'm like, what about this? What about that? And they like ideas. So then they asked me if I would write a script for them, which I do. They love the script, and all of a sudden I'm a writer on the show. So I became assistant to writer the first season of Saints and Sinners. I went to Atlanta to help produce, my episode as well as the rest of the show. And then the second season I came back as a producer.
Nice.
Yeah. So, it was a non-union show. It's a little bit different than union shows. But that helped me kind of get my feet wet. And then from there, I went on to, I was an assistant on The Quad, in which I got a freelance episode. And then from there, I got staffed into a show called Ambitions for Own. So ever since then, I've just been kicking it and looking for the next gig. Ambitions was great. I got 3 episodes. It was like the #1 show for women on Tuesday nights on OWN. Right now, I'm just developing material, doing some more films, and just getting my name out there. So
Awesome, man. Awesome. Let's go. Let's pivot back because you went through a lot of things, a lot of steps right there, right? So, but go talk about being a writer's assistant because a lot of times people, especially people that follow Artist Spotlight, they're going to get that first job, right? So that sounds like one of those entry level or kind of your first door into the business. What was that like?
again, I came out here wanting to get involved, and it took me like 5 or so years to just get that first assistant position. So I valued it a lot. Um, as the writer's assistant, you're pretty much taking notes on everything, right? So you have a room and you have, anywhere from 4 to 10 writers, and they're going through the story, they're talking things out, and you're taking notes on basically everything that they say. So you have to be a really good typer and you have to be a really good listener. And then at the end of the day, obviously all those things that they're talking about isn't going to stick. So then you have to go through the notes, take out, what doesn't pertain to the story anymore, keep what still pertains to the story,
Right.
and then you send notes at the end of the day. So you're pretty much just kind of like keeping things organized.
Got it.
Because when the writers, when they go to write the outlines, when they go to write the scripts, you can't keep everything in your head.
Exactly.
So they refer to those notes to make sure that they have everything in place.
Now, when you moved into the actual writer position, when you actually were a staff writer, how was that? How was your day looking like with that? I'm assuming you're working with other writers in a writer's room, etc. Now, who are you dealing with and communicating with on a daily basis?
Yeah, no, I just first want to say that I think I was really, really lucky to have been a writer's assistant before I official writer, because I understood how a room worked and I understood how the politics of the room worked. A lot of rooms gets very political and it can be hard to, figure out when you need to bob and when you need to weave. So because I had that experience, it was a little bit easier for me and it wasn't for some. But as a writer, I mean, you pretty much, you have a showrunner, right? And they're the ones with the template for the show. So that's the big trick. You're not coming in to write what you want to write. You're coming in to help them with their vision of the show. So you really just kind of like look at them for guidance, and that they're like, well, we need to go in this direction or we need to do this. You just kind of come up with pitches for how that can happen. So this show was in Atlanta, which is a little bit different, but most writers' rooms are going to be in LA. You come in, again, it's a room full of writers. Sometimes you just come in and you just talk and you talk about your day, you talk about your feelings, and you get to know each other. And then at one point, the showrunner or whoever will come in and say, this is what we need to work on for the day. Sometimes they'll be there, sometimes they won't. But, you come up with ideas and you come up with pitches, and then the showrunner comes back into the room, and then you have to be the one, or, somebody from that group has to be the one to pitch them what you came up with. I was always the one, for some reason, that they wanted to pitch. They felt like if it came from me, it would go over. So I was always up there pitching to the showrunner, this is what we came up with. Every show is different, but when it comes to the writing of it, usually at one point when you're done outlining an episode and the network's approved and everybody, they'll assign it to a writer, and then that writer goes off and they might have a week to 2 weeks to kind of write the episode. Our room was different. We did a thing called group write. So we would have the outline, and then we would divvy it up. Everybody would go home, write an act, bring it back the next day. You would note it, and then you go back home, work on the rewrite, and then bring it back. And then that would be like the official draft that they worked on. Do that with small rooms because you don't have, we only had 6 writers. So somebody going off for 2 weeks really kind of leaves us understaffed. So yeah, that was kind of the experience as a staff writer. But I just want to emphasize to everybody, you're there to help the showrunner. You're not there to make the show you want. You're there to help them make the show that they want.
Kind of clue us in on a little bit, someone who may be coming in that didn't have that, leverage of doing that, and what kind of things you should watch out for, not creative wise, but more just kind of knowing the room, when to speak up, just in etiquette, I would say,
Yeah, I think the thing that, as I said, I was a writer, or I was a writer's assistant on the Quad. Showrunner was this legendary Black woman. Her name is Felicia D. Henderson. She's done Soul Food. She's done all these type of shows. She was on Empire. She's all over the place. And what I learned from that is we had a staff, and the staff was very much upper level, right? Basically, all the writers on that show had pretty much run their own shows before. So they all knew what they were doing. Nobody was new. They all were very veteran. And they were at Felicia's beck and call, right? If Felicia needed this, what do you need? I got it. I got you. It was very much like a team effort. They were just so like forthcoming with, whatever you need, I'll do it. And I was just like, well, if that's the attitude these veteran writers have, then that's probably what I should model myself after.
Right.
So when I got into Ambitions, that was me. I was there early, right? I was the first person there. I got there before the assistant sometimes. I was the last person to leave. I volunteered for stuff. You need me to write on the board. You need me to go do this scene. You need me to go to this meeting. Like, whatever you need me to do, I got you. So I really just made myself available for whatever they need. I felt I was like a soldier, right? The Army, I'm a soldier, put me where you need me to be so that we can win. And I also think that it's important for people who are starting out to know that, a staffing job, it can be long hours, right? You get there early. Sometimes you stay late.
What's long hours? What does that mean? Give me an example.
Well, I mean, normal hours would be like from 10 to 6 or something like that. But sometimes you might have to stay 10 to 7, 10 to 8, 10 to 9. On the court, we had a time where we were there till 5 in the morning. On Sinners, we had a note session that started at 12 on Saturday and then end until 1 a.m. Monday morning.
Wow.
So,
right.
Yeah. So I think a lot of writers, they get in and, they want to take time off. They're like, oh, I got this stuff going on. I got this personal stuff I got to do, blah, 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 blah. But if you're like the staff writer, which is like the very lowest level, like you need to be there as much as possible. Like you shouldn't be taking any time off because you want that showrunner to know that you're there, for whatever he needs, whenever you need.
That's right.
So I have a big piece of advice I would go say, don't take time off. Just block out that time that you're on that show and just be as available as possible.
And what's the time frame that you've seen for most shows when you booked on the show or a season or episode that you're going to be there? Give me a time span if you can ballpark it.
It really just depends on the show.
Got it.
The Quad was, I think it was 10 episodes. So as a writer's assistant, I was there from like June to November.
Okay.
Ambitions was 18 episodes.
Yeah.
So I was pretty much for 8 months. But Saints and Sinners, Saints and Sinners was 8 episodes, and I was there for like maybe 3 or 4 months. So it really just depends on the show. It depends on the how fast you can get through stuff with the processes. Sometimes you got to get through a lot of network stuff. Sometimes you don't. Some shows take 7 days to do an episode. Some shows take 6 or 5 days to do an episode. So it really just depends. Got
it. Great, man. Great. Well, Jazmen, let's switch a little bit to more of the technical, if you don't mind. So we get into more of the actual tools of the trade. So you went to Florida State, you said. So how do you feel about as far as formal education as a barrier to entry? Is that necessary? Is it if not? Do you feel like you have to have a broad knowledge of film, literature, go to film school? Like or can you come in cold, which you just got a lot of ideas and you're creative? Like what's your take on that?
Okay, so I think that's a loaded question. I did want to go to film school. I really did. And for a time I was preparing to, but everyone told me, they were like, listen, the best thing that you get out of film school is connections, right? It's the people that you go through film school with that'll go on and do whatever, and then they'll hire you someday or they'll introduce you to somebody that you need. So, I think film school is great because it's a couple years in which you can just be creative. But it's not the most necessary thing. I would say if you really want to get involved and you don't have the opportunity to go to film school, just hit the ground running, right? Just write as much as possible, read as much as possible, do as much homework as possible. And the ugly truth about Hollywood also is that it's a very much of a relationship business, right? So I think there's some screenwriting teachers that say when you come out to LA, give yourself 3 to 5 years to make the connections that you need to get a TV job. So I don't think film school is absolutely necessary. It's great, but the great thing about the times that we're living in is that there's so many free resources. Your podcast for one. Books, when I started writing, I just went online and I read as many books as possible and I read as many scripts as possible. So you can definitely make it happen without that formal education.
Got it. So, and I'm seeing that, the process you outlaid about writing for shows is more, like you said, you're writing for someone else's vision. That's
the change that you go from writing your own stuff to kind of being professional, right? When you're own stuff, it's really, what you're into, what you respond to. But then once you become a professional, you not only have the showrunner, you have executives. If you sell a film, is going to have to change depending on what the studio wants. So you get into the mindset where you learn that it's really a collaborative process. And you have to, defend your ideas, right? You have to say, this is why I like this and this is why I think it should go, but also be able to be flexible, and see, okay, this person might have a point on this, or they're looking for something different. Is there a way where I can get what I want, but still do what they want?
Right.
And I think the thing that helped me, and I think this is also great for anyone who wants to get involved, I have, when I came out here, I got involved in a number of different writers groups, right?
Okay.
And it's a bunch of people who want to write. We meet every 2 weeks. We read each other's scripts, and then we just spend an hour just tearing it down, right? This is what I didn't like. This is what you can do better on, this and this and this. And so you build like a thick skin, right? Because everyone wants to just make the project better. It's not really personal.
Right.
But you start to think of in terms of like, okay, this is what I thought I was writing, but this is what other people perceive it as.
Got it.
And if I want to sell something, or if I want to, get more involved or become professional, I need to start thinking in terms of everybody else instead of just me.
Awesome.
Yeah.
And it kind of makes you, kind of sharpens your sword a little bit too, right? Kind of makes you critique yourself. Yeah.
Yeah. And I would also say another part of it is that it's also a little bit easier sometimes, right? Because you're working with a team of people. Like sometimes it's hard to like sit there and come up with this whole story.
Right.
But in a writing room, you got 6 or 7 people, and sometimes they're telling you exactly what they want. They're like, figure out how to get from point A to point B, and all you got to do is figure out how to do that instead of all the stuff you have to do when you're writing on your own. So sometimes it can be a little bit liberating. It's like, okay, I can just come in and, shoot the shit and throw out some ideas and see where it lands. There's not as much pressure as when you're writing your own stuff. I mean, the great thing about the times we're living in is that filmmaking has become so much easier, right? It's so accessible. You can make films off your camera, off your cell phone.
Right.
I would say for me, the great thing about technology is podcasts. I listen to a ton of podcasts. I listen to a ton of YouTube videos. And I feel like you can get a lot of like free education just by going online and like finding these resources. I've always wanted to tell stories about young people of color. And so I'm very drawn to, movies or TV shows that are kind of in that arena. I'm working with a very talented filmmaker right now. His name is Donnie Leapart in Atlanta. And every single conversation we have, we talk about the movie Attack the Block. we love that movie. And it came out in a time where there weren't that many black movies, especially movies about young teens. So I don't know. I say my brand is a lot of fun and a lot of heart, right? Big, fun, imaginative stories that are still emotionally compelling. So yeah, I would say a lot of like young adult sci-fi, young adult science fiction or fantasy, but dealing with young people of color. That's the stuff that I want to write. It's not the stuff I've been hired to write, but it's the stuff that I'm drawn to.
Do you feel now in 2020 that we're starting to see, I guess, a bigger presence for African Americans having a bigger voice and controlling their own storytelling?
Yeah, I think stuff is slowly changing. I think when I came out to LA, it was in the early 2010s. There was nothing. Like literally, there was a year where the only black movies that came out were like 3 Tyler Perry movies, and I think Martin Lawrence came out with like Big Mama's House 4 or something like that.
Right.
That was it. It was
right.
pretty terrible. But since there's so many shows now and so many avenues, and there was this big push for diversity, we are seeing a lot more stuff getting done, a lot more shows, a lot more movies. Obviously, I mean, Parasite just won. Get Out. Black. So that type of entertainment is being more respected, which is great. I would say, though, we still have a little bit more progress to make in terms of behind the scenes. Not that, like, Lena Waithe or Issa Rae, if you're not that big brand filmmaker, then and you're still a person of color, it's kind of hard, right? Because when they greenlight something, they're kind of greenlighting it off the person, right? They're like, oh, Issa Rae has this fan base, so if we greenlight Issa Rae's project, all her people will come. But if you're not this big brand, then they're not as confident in the material. So that's hard. I would say the other thing is behind the scenes, diversity isn't as present as it needs to be. We might see Black actors, but the behind the scenes, the crew, the director, the writers, those aren't always the people that it needs to be. And I kind of want to do more of that. I'm all about finding stories that I want told and figuring out a way to make them. So whether I'm the writer or whether I'm just the producer, it's really about just putting material out there. I also have a short film that's on the film festival circuit right now. It's called Bloom. It stars Skyland Brooks, which a lot of people would remember from the Get Down. He was one of the Get Down brothers on the Netflix show. And he also has a recurring role on Empire right now.
What would you leave with them from all of your career thus far, that what you've learned?
Yeah, I would say two things. The first is I think you really need to map out what you want, right? Because it's like, okay, if you want to be a TV writer, you need to be in LA. So you need to make steps to come to LA. You need to start making connections. You need to start doing the things that kind of lead to that path. But if you want to be like an independent filmmaker, an independent director, then perhaps you're better off going to somewhere like Atlanta or, somewhere that has like a thriving filmmaking community that isn't necessarily Hollywood. Because I don't know, a lot of people in LA, we kind of have like the same types of stories, right? So if you're coming from someplace different, you're going to have a different story sense and you're going to be able to kind of get out above the crowd. So I would just say, really do your research and figure out what you want and what's the best way to get there. But my second point, and this is something that I heard from Lena Waithe maybe like a year ago, and I thought it was so brilliant. She basically said she said that her success was very, very simple. All she did was take the things that made her, right? Her insecurities, her inspirations, her aspirations, the thing that made her unique, and she wrapped it up in a package so that other people can make money off it, right? And so
that's dope.
I think that's a great way to look at it. It's like, what makes you unique? What makes you tick? What's the good? What's the bad? And then just kind of like figure out a way to kind of sell that or package that. Because when you come out here and you're trying to tell your stories, it has to get very personal. Everyone's into authentic storytelling. So, you might have this great story about this train robber that did this, that did that, but how does that personally connect to you, right? If it doesn't connect to you, how is it going to connect with other people?
Got it.
So yeah, I said just finding out the personal part of your story and why you want to tell it so much, I think is a great way to kind of like get involved in the, I guess, artistic process.